I know you know. I know. Yeah.
I'm supposed to say you guys can help yourself too.
How are you? Good. Ready? Yeah, nice.
I say that tentatively.
I know a couple of people as well. I know one person who's I don't know if I can talk. I don't know why he's not. Okay.
I worked in girls last year. So I pushed back. Yeah, girls press checks. And that's not my curriculum. It's right at How are you?
All right. I'm not doing it.
Bad teaching day. Citizens. Next week's the 10th. Not yeah. Wait, did you get my graduate? Okay. And what role are you in?
I'm not sure. Because I think the first time I was so taught, people should watch it. Never anti-ed. Okay. So we the other two are mine. I'm working on. Where you need to close your gaps.
Sure. Yeah, I started in the summer of October.
How are you?
Hi. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I just sent you registration materials with a personal note.
Great.
Little handwritten note,
forward
which we're not supposed to do because it's supposed to be official materials, but I wrote. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Me too.
How are you?
Years ago.
Almost.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, my aunt passed away. Had a baby on the way. It's very complicated situation.
Actually on the way here. Yeah, I got with Cynthia when she got the text.
Yeah, was it?
Shannon's gonna come. No, well, these guys are
Especially
not
older,
there.
it would be.
But the rest are.
But we all got through it. Everything. Still too much. Something about
Everybody else is from Gill's program, principals
You're almost
institute,
done.
or.
It's very surreal registering for that.
How are you?
Yeah, well, we're all.
Last year.
I know.
Right. And I'm kind of sort of yeah. And the whole school actually moved too? Oh no, for you you're saying it's a new school. So what are you gonna say?
Is this like a summer thing? You do it for the summer? It is a different thing, though. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's really fashionable statement. She does a lot, and I think I'm gonna just kind of so they don't know. I did, but I lightened it a little bit for summer. Yeah, it's like a lot of stuff going in there. I'm excited. How are you? How's school? School's pretty good right now.
I'm just grabbing my notebook.
I'm sorry, were you here?
No, I wasn't. I dumped it down when I was talking.
So then things are easier now?
Yeah, settled in. And I was going to ask you, so you're saying you're in school, so I was never changed this one school.
It's going good, except they fell last one time. I was just lucky that I had been, and then the time right when I was working on
Yeah.
So I was doing things without even thinking about it.
and
Meaning new things, but
and
no, I knew how to do my own things. I knew what administration expected. I didn't have
and
to
I've
plan for
been
it. It
dying
just
to go
happened.
there. So
But now,
I was walking and I was like
starting for
walking
me,
while I
it
was
was
reading
regular
the sign in
starting
front
out
of
over.
it saying where the line is at. And my ankles are bad and the sidewalk we like moving and I just like
Which I thought because of this, I was like, okay, let's do that.
Have you been like acting in
New blade,
I have really bad ankles.
but I like it. I just left because of the administration.
I was really upset last week. I couldn't find
Why
my
you lose a lot?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, names I'm not so good with. But what's her name?
Kayla.
Kayla.
So that has to be.
He's good. He's fine. All that stuff. Hell yeah. Yeah, of course I have one
I'm
like
sure you
right
have
on
like
the phone.
1,000. It's probably your screen.
not really Oh my god, smart.
It's very fancy.
Of course not.
I have a dress that was in my closet. Yeah. I'm wearing Converse.
And it goes away. I miss that.
Dress up and dress
I keep thinking like I wish I could just press like freeze button. But
How are you doing, Eric?
every emotion is
I know right now it's beautiful, but
If you press to refresh,
good.
get a new one.
Yeah, that's true. I think we're done.
Oh, really? Do you have it? Just
We have,
him?
he has two older sisters.
don't have
Okay, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, not a lot, but
none of my classes.
you program to older kids, you want, it's a lot to juggle.
You have two?
I have a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old. Yeah, they're pretty good at it. They're not,
He's like 45 minutes live, but then I have like 90 minutes live.
Yeah. Shit. I remember you saying like, agreeing with you like silently that it was going to be hard
Like, no, well, everybody decides.
taking on the program and the comedy and them,
After,
you know, because it's still in summer. Just taking care of them.
They, they're pretty good. You're so much time. I was worried. I'm like, whatever, Mom, we'll eat pizza. Of course.
Yeah.
But they were home alone. It was the first summer that they were home so often alone. They were fine. It was me, you know. I had never done that before. This year they went away. Not because I wanted it, but because my husband was like, no. They can go. You know, be with grandma for a month.
the new visions
Cool.
algebra
And
curriculum.
meatloaf.
Yeah. Instead
My
of
own
pizza.
stuff.
There's a fresh idea.
Yeah.
What is it called? I always forget the name of it.
So the rest of
It's a
was
math curriculum.
a lot of reading, a lot of writing. I'm like still nervous and stuff.
You'll have no choice but to do it. But it won't be bad.
I know the guy who
It'll be hard once while you're going through it. Once it's done, it's
You guys maybe be together.
and already you can are used to it. Just became the we have a child. We don't communicate as often as I would like because we're also busy at work.
Yeah.
There are two members who are far. There's one in California and there's one in upstate New York. But I feel like we grew very close to each other.
I look forward to meeting new folks that I'll be
Start again?
not start.
That's fine. Do it at the right time, not just because you have to talk now.
Yeah.
But what I really liked about it is that it wasn't about textbook learning. Some programs I think really are. It was about the conversations that were happening in the room. The papers were very much that way. The stars, feelings about it. The readings, that's how we connected to them. Just had conversations around it. It didn't feel intense to be in the classroom. It felt intense to work outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
But the time in the classroom I really liked. And the readings are not bad. The readings are better.
Yeah, text me the lead. There's some of them are
redundant. You read it here and you have to kind of read it again.
I like going, I
People
feel
reiterate the same.
every one for ICT class. I like walk in and I'm just like,
Was somebody moving to California or coming?
They came from California. They stayed for a month here. Erica, stayed for a month and then she went back.
I think it's just because she's the first year.
I had no shit. We would take the train home back to us. So
But like, there's this one girl,
uncle, she, you know, it's a month. She's 5 months.
Goes by quickly.
I thought it went by very quickly. It didn't. In retrospect, it went by very quickly. Going through it,
there's this two other
it
girls
didn't feel like it was rushed. It didn't feel
don't like to act like to me.
I think the hardest part was the lack of sleep, right?
Oh, the first year? I think it was, if you manage your time correctly, you'll be fine. It's that, like, I know I would get overwhelmed because I would procrastinate, and then I would feel it. You too. I think that we had, I hear about you a lot. Yeah, I love them.
You know what? How many readings you can get started on now? I don't know if you're starting. We know what the readings are. Oh, you have them. You can have the syllabi. Just go through them, some of the big readings. If it's the same professor, they might. I'm trying to get.
I had that idea, but of course I procrastinated. Yeah, that's so many other things.
And Robin's
But it's still a good idea.
There's a lot of
They didn't have the
Between
technology.
finishing school and starting here, it's really
Yeah. Oh, you have a week in between? We start the very next day. You're up in the charter zone. Oh, okay. The board of the University Board ends the day before. We start the very next day.
yeah, I think each memory serves the orientation was like the very last day in June or something like that. There was July 4th that we started like Tuesday, I feel like.
You're not that far from it.
Our kids are done like on the 15th, 16th, and then we have like a week of workshops and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you a lot for having you.
And I need to use it.
You have the whole day, like, about how you use it. It's a nice thing to use this summer.
Yeah.
I
And then
The papers are crazy. They don't have you get the reading done. And then you have
They don't have that, no.
Talk about the reading. Very first when there was a week left of school, I was tired. I was wondering. Of the program is how they care for and they do.
We're hoping that she's that's more important. I'll put her on your radar, don't worry, because then there's pre-assignments and just.
What is it for the 10 years that you have an organizational? Like,
Which one are you taking?
I get it.
All right, you let me know. I thought it was adult.
Yeah, for the 5 years.
Remember I said because it's one.
Either way, you're very welcome.
That was one of the things I saw in the summer, and I was like, you look at this game, like, the first day, you come up with a section, and the second day, you're like, writing stuff about it.
Fresh start. We're talking about how the and by the end, almost all of us have questions.
I remember thinking that was like the part that had like those clear, like support, like clear, like how
Because it's so personal.
right. It's not like here's a whole bunch of different ideas that you could be thinking in terms of, you know, where does your question fall? It's why do you question?
We would discuss them, and then she would ask questions. She wouldn't say yes or no. She would say, well, why would you want to ask? Or why? I don't know. What makes that valid? And you have to support it.
Right.
I'm glad you're right.
I'm excited for tonight.
This is I am like that.
Yeah, we have more.
That like when teachers do it, what they're supposed to come away with is that links to things with letters. Like email,
You can get those credits for free, right? I asked her last summer what you were teaching. That class is
Yeah. I'm gonna join
I'm very excited because I got
You're right. You're in.
our superintendent.
Okay. Okay, I think we're gonna get started. Okay? That doesn't mean you have to stop eating, but we'll start to focus our conversation. So I welcome you to the final Weismann dinner for the school year. Very exciting. And it has been, so in case we haven't met, I'm Anthony Canelli. I'm the chair of the leadership department here at Bank Street. So this has been a treat for me because it actually has given me a place to actually learn about Bank Street in some different ways and get to meet some of you in different ways, which has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed that. Tonight's conversation is going to be a fascinating one and I think an important one. And so I would say I played many roles in the DOE, and one of the roles that I played was, you know, supervisor in different ways, however you want to define the term. And I can remember we had a group of principals coming together at a school, and they were going to visit a school. It was an elementary school, and I had gotten there early to work with the principal to arrange, review of classes we were going to visit and all this stuff. And when I looked at the list of classes, I said, you don't have any math classes, on the schedule. Why not? And her response was, I don't visit math classes in my school. And I said, well, that's interesting. Why not? And she said, because I don't know math, I am not a math person, and I cannot go into a math classroom and engage in a conversation with the teacher about mathematics. And I said, this was the tough question. I said, so how could you be a good principal if you don't visit math classes? And she was a smart. She said, I've gotten by so far. But we're very lucky to have this conversation happening tonight. I think it's an important conversation, and and it's the only thing in our societies that you're allowed to be is not a math person, right? Nobody in the room can say I'm not a literate person, right? And, or I'm not interested in social justice, and I'm not interested in what's happening in the world, and I'm not interested in how technology is impacting our society. But we can say, I am not a math person, and nobody will think any less of you. And that is
Well.
And that is such a shame, and that is so wrong. And and as leaders, it's so important for us to be able to engage in any conversation about any subject area, about any pedagogy with folks, whether we're experts or not, right? That's the whole concept of teaching and learning. The concept is it's a place for us to enter into any conversation, not as an expert, but as a learner, right? And that if we think about that, that is such a liberating thing, right? That no matter what, we can enter a conversation as a learner. We don't need to know a lot, right? But as learners, as good learners, what we have at our fingertips is the ability to ask questions and learn. Right? And so we're very lucky to have this conversation tonight, and I'm going to turn things over to Robin Hummel, who is the program director for our math leadership program. And she will introduce our panelists and get us started on some conversation and some math problems.
Just one. Just a little one.
Life is good.
Don't be scared. Don't leave. Lock the door.
I'm going to stand by the door.
So, welcome. We're so excited to have you here, and we always love to talk math. And Anthony's story about not being a math person, it's so accurate, because we would never allow a parent to say, oh, well, she doesn't read because I don't read. And yet we hear that for math all the time, she's not a math, especially girls, she's not a math person because I don't like math. So we don't accept it in literacy, and we shouldn't accept it in mathematics, because mathematics ability is not genetic. It's not inherited. I'm the poster child for math ability. Can be developed at any age. I was a history major in college, and a proud graduate of the math leadership program. Anyway, so we like to start out on your agenda. There's an excerpt from a book we'd like to recommend for those of you who resonate with Anthony's story about the principal who would probably avoid interacting with teachers who are teaching math, and it's called Small Steps, Big Changes, 8 Essential Practices for Transforming School Through Mathematics. And the reference is on your agenda, and it's a really accessible, easy, interesting, provocative read. So you could put this on your list of really good things to read. The first thing we'd like to do is introduce our panel. So if you guys just want to one line, just go down and say your name and where you're from.
Sure. My name's Morgan Altman. I am a graduate of the Math Leadership Program, and I'm currently the Leadership Fellow at Citizens of the World Charter School in Brooklyn at their regional level.
Hi. Hi, I'm David Krowich. I'm the principal of the Urban Assembly School for Applied Math and Science, which is a middle school and high school in the Bronx. Bank Street 2007.
My name's Tom Mullen. I'm a graduate of the Math Leadership Program here at Bank Street and the principal of Leaders High School, a New York City outward bound school in South Brooklyn.
I'm Lucy Morell, also a graduate of the Math Leadership Program
There's a
here at
pattern.
Bank Street. We sat ourselves like that. And I am an assistant principal at MS 324, which is in Washington Heights.
My name is Josh Rosen. I was in the Math Leadership Program in the early 2000s. I'm currently K-6 math specialist in Dobbs Ferry, Westchester.
My name is Evan Jenkins, and I am currently the math academic director at a charter school network in Harlem called Harlem Village Academies.
Okay, so, just because whenever we get together, we really like to do math problems together, because it's fun, and for those of you in the middle of your table, you'll see manipulatives and the problem. So if you somebody want to take it out and dump it on the table just to invite people to touch the manipulatives, that's fine. But the problem basically is 1/2 divided by 1/6. What does it mean? What is the answer? And how did you figure it out? So just take a few minutes. And then is there the problem doing there's a copy of the problem?
Oh, you want a pen?
There's a copy.
I probably do. I like to do it now. Just spread the wealth.
So if you have a half,
You guys don't have any questions? And then, the other one, you tell me exactly what we're gonna do.
All right.
And then we'll give 2 minutes for each of you to respond to something.
I did the reciprocal of 1/6.
And that's the telling too much.
You know what? I didn't get a math job because I couldn't explain it. No, they said like.
Okay, who has an answer?
The
Jill, what's the
second
answer?
fraction needs to be inverted
3.
to 6/1.
Jill's answer.
And then you can
Wait, wait,
multiply
guys,
it. You
guys, can we
multiply.
have everybody's awareness?
You said Jill. I thought you said, she said.
So, let me say that. Let me repeat.
Guys, can we have everybody's awareness, please? Jill, what's the answer?
3.
3. Who agrees with Jill? Who disagrees with Jill? Who isn't sure? Oh, who isn't sure? Okay. I don't understand how you can divide fractions and get a whole number, but that's a different issue. How'd you get that?
Well, what I did is I inverted the 1/6.
Yeah, what do we call that? Anybody know?
The reciprocal?
In what language? And then I multiplied.
Okay. So,
I got 6/2,
6/2,
which equals 3.
which equals 3. Okay. I don't really understand how you got a whole number when you divided fractions, but and how many of you would be satisfied with that answer and with that explanation? How many teachers do you know who would be satisfied with that answer, which happens to be the right answer, and her explanation? Ours is not the reason why, I just inverted and multiplied.
My teachers would have been satisfied.
Your teachers would be. but you're not. There we go. Okay, so basically that's the reason for the evening. We want to make sure that even if you are graduating and going out into the world to be progressive leaders, we want to make sure that you're not just letting teachers teach for technical expertise and not for conceptual understanding. So just quickly, what does this even mean? What does it even mean? 1/2 divided by 1/6. Deepa?
So it didn't make sense to me, so I was thinking half of something makes sense to me.
Okay.
So I was thinking, well, what's half of 60 minutes? That's 30 minutes. And then I said, well, what's 1/6 of 60 minutes? That's 10 minutes. So then I kind of changed the question to say, well, how many 10 minutes are in 30 minutes? Three groups of 10 minutes. So the pattern blocks I could see visually, but I couldn't make sense of.
Okay.
But thinking about time.
The clock is a wonderful tool. So it's not really, so the 3 isn't talking about 3 wholes, it's talking about 3 pieces of the whole, which would be 6/6, right? Because there's 6 10-minutes in an hour, right? So for the pattern blocks, who made sense of the pattern blocks? What is your name?
Meg.
Maggie?
Yeah, Meg.
Meg. Go ahead, Meg.
So at like 1 whole and half of a whole is the trapezoid, and then how much to cover the trapezoid, and that's 3 pieces, which makes sense because there are 6 pieces in a whole hexagon.
Okay. Very nice. So that took a little longer, and I got a lot of problems to get through, and I have to give them homework. Except if you send them home, just having done that, they're either going to technically give you back what you taught them, or they're going to do the work for understanding. And teaching for understanding takes a little longer. And you don't get through as many problems, but you deepen their understanding so they can actually, research shows, and Evan can confirm this because this is what his research is about. Research shows that students who approach testing with understanding do better on the test. So even though you might not have covered as much material, the material you did cover that you taught for understanding, they know how to do. Okay, so we're going to take, we have in front of you is on the agenda, there's the questions that all of you submitted to us. Thank you very much, by the way. The other leadership cohorts submitted these wonderful questions for us to consider. And the panelists have been looking at these questions for a week or so, and they have some responses to these questions. So we're going to just go right down the line, and they're all going to talk for about 3 minutes, and then they're choosing the question that's most compelling to them.
I can start?
Go ahead, Morgan.
Okay. So I chose question number 2, how do I work with math faculty to develop meaningful math curriculum? I chose this because this is the work I've been immersed in the last 6 years, and having gone from a school that had a foundation for the work that I wanted to do to a school that just bought a new curricular program, there was a real shift in my year this year. And I think it's important to put out there that we haven't figured it all out, right? We're trying things and we're trying our best to make the most of what we know is good math instruction and good curricular planning, but at the end of the day, we're sort of flying the plane while we're building it, and it's hard work. So you sort of have to accept that and then plan for your curriculum development from that understanding. So I was thinking about some basic foundational sort of philosophies that I use to approach this work, and one is that curricular development takes time, and I mean a lot of time. So as leaders, we need to plan for that and plan for what it looks like in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years, and have knowing that it's going to take that long and that there are constantly going to be revisions to the work. The second thing I was thinking about, and and I'm curious to see what people think about this, but that the programs we buy are not our curriculum, and we have to understand that as a community in our schools, that we cannot just purchase these books and teach right out of them, that we have to design our curriculum that's right for our kids and for the vision that we have for our school. And that sort of brings me to my last point, is that this path of curriculum development is driven by a very clear vision for what excellent math instruction looks like in your school, whatever that might be for you. So those are sort of the foundational pieces that I use for this work. And then from there, as a leader, again, like, we have to make time for this work. So that long-term plan, that I have it in my head and I'm transparent with that, and then making sure that I'm incorporating it into professional development for teachers. I think a lot of times we're not reasonable with what we're asking teachers to do. And we ask them to do all this curricular development, and then we're like, okay, and go lesson plan too. So I think as leaders, we have to be reasonable and strategic about what resources we're actually providing to teachers and what the work is that we're asking them to do, knowing that they spend 8 to 10 hours in front of students all day. So I think a lot about that as I'm creating this work. And that this work is collaborative, so I have that in mind, but that I can't do this work alone, that I have to be doing it with the teachers and other leaders in my school as we go through.
Thank you, Morgan. What question did you like?
I was going to answer a similar one, the question number 3, how do I work with math faculty to shift thinking around what it means to teach math for conceptual understanding as opposed to technical expertise? And I'll try to talk fast, it's hard to fit that into 3 minutes. And there are a lot of similarities, I think, to what you just said. I think in working with math teachers, I mean, I've worked with, I guess 50 to 100 math teachers at this point. I've been principal and assistant principal and a math coach at the same school for about 12 years. And I think one thing that sort of frustrates me or concerns me is kind of like you said, the idea of sort of quick fix solutions. There's just over and over again we hear about a new curriculum or a new textbook, or we're going to change the tests and do something different, or we're going to change the standards. But what my opinion is that working with teachers to really, math teaching is really difficult. It's difficult to teach anything, but like Robin said at the beginning, overcoming this idea that you can be bad at math and overcoming this problem of how we were taught math when we were kids being so different is really difficult. So we have a huge job in front of us, in a sense, that takes a lot more than just handing someone a curriculum or a textbook. So at my school, we've really focused on literally planning every lesson together in teams and sharing lessons with someone who's already a veteran teacher every single day, back and forth, and providing pushback. I like to I like asking people to think about, I've visited not that many schools, but I've visited some. Maybe you visited more than me. What do you think, what percentage of the classrooms, when a kid goes into math, when they go into a math class, what percentage of the periods or days or anywhere is a child going into math class, and what is it? How often is it a teacher gives them the 3 steps to solve the next type of problem, and then they do 20 of them, or whatever. Very often it's 17 that have only numbers, and then the last 3 have some words in it. And I think it's even worse. And I don't know what percentage it is. I would guess it's maybe 95% of the time a kid goes, at least in secondary, that when a kid goes into math class, that's what it is. And I like to think, it's pretty sad to me to think about what that does to a kid. We know what it does. After year after year after year, if that's what you think math is, you go in and you have to listen and then you imitate 3 steps that someone gave you. It's a real problem that we have to overcome. So then sometimes when I say that, people say, well, what else do you do in math? There are not that many people who've had the opportunity to see the Bank Street School or schools like this. And I think there are, I guess I'll stop for 5 seconds. To teach what a discovery task is, or a math project, or a problem-solving lesson, or a number sense lesson, those are all wildly different that could take a year or two of working with teachers.
I also, I just wanna add, I also think it requires a fundamental shift in what it means to teach mathematics. I mean, even people who've studied mathematics, who have deep, deep understanding of math, have some people have a, who think that when they've taught the algorithm, they've taught math. That's how they're defining teaching math, and I don't know any teachers who teach English or any of the other subjects who say, well, read this page as fast as you can and get all the words, pronounce the words correctly, and I've taught you how to read or comprehend text. So we need to think about how we fundamentally define what it means to teach mathematics. Okay, Tom, you're
Okay.
next.
I'd like to build on that with number 3. I think I've found it powerful to frame the discussion in terms of social justice and social change. And sometimes teachers are like, oh, wait, math? You know, don't you mean history? Or something like that. But if you frame math and you talk about it in this way and you say, if every time a child comes across a problem that doesn't have an obvious answer, their immediate response is to turn to a person in a position of authority and ask them, how do I do this? What are the steps to do this? And it doesn't really matter why I'm doing it, just please tell me what to do. If that becomes the mindset of a student, especially in a subject like math, which is considered by some as an elite, you know, the secret message that only some people should understand. So if it becomes, okay, what do I do in a situation like that? I turn to the person in a position of authority. How do I do this? They tell them, don't worry about how, just do it. In society, when that student faces a problem in the real world, outside class, or in their lives, and they're stuck and they say, I don't really know what to do. And then their response is not to turn to their peers. So let's talk about the other option. If you're teaching math where, okay, first of all, problems are non-routine on a regular basis. And where do you go when you're confused? You look to your peers. You look to your peers to collaborate and discuss. And you need to understand what's really going on in order to not just solve the problem, but understand the context behind it, understand why things work. And you talk to teachers about what will that then lead to their lives? How will that change their lives? If you know what, no, that's not how I do it. When I'm confused, and it's confusing stuff. When I'm confused, I talk to my peers and we collaborate. We try to figure out how to do this. That's a completely different mindset. And if you say that the first scenario is really a form of oppression, and that the latter scenario is a pedagogy that leads to liberation, that kind of, it can be more inspiring than, you know what, it's just for a better test score. And because I'm not even sure if it's better for a test score, because I didn't do that, and I got great test scores. You know, whoever might say that. But so then after that, I think putting it out there and saying why we need to do this can be inspiring, and then it becomes, okay, well then how we're going to do it. And then I believe studying together, reading text together, like we did here at Bank Street, like I did with Barbara Dubitsky, and then teachers can own it for themselves. It doesn't become the principal's plan. Once they've kind of studied it, read it, no, this is my vision. And then the last point, because I'm sure I'm over, is small steps. Don't just ask teachers to radically change what they're doing. You know what, here's one problem. Let's twist this one problem around to make it non-routine. And every time that we're studying and we're preparing for a lesson, we don't just think about what we are going to say to kids, but we think about what we're not going to say to kids. And it's just as important. If you think, you have to plan for what you're not going to say and do it little step by step, then teachers feel success on a small level and then want to go bigger.
Thanks, John. Okay, Lucy?
I think we're sort of sticking with the theme here. I'm going to
Okay.
piggyback on some of what you guys have said. I think it's sort of a hybrid of questions 2 and 3. I think in my case, it's maybe somewhat different also because I'm at a middle school, and so the people who we hired or who were already there when I came in, because I was also a teacher there before I became the coach and now an AP and also still the math coach, are math people. So these are people who've chosen to teach mathematics and love math. But obviously they were some in different places on like the spectrum of maybe teaching math conceptually versus more procedurally. So I think for us the task was figuring out both how to shift the mindset a bit to make a really meaningful math curriculum. And I think largely as a result of going here to Bank Street to the Math Leadership Program, one of the first things I thought about when I became an AP was how can I, and if I have this vision, and I think that a lot of other people in our department share this vision, but how can I be sure that we all have a clear vision of mathematics here? And how can we build that to know that this is, we all share this belief, and if people don't yet share this belief, even if they say they do because their peers in the department say like, oh yeah, this is how we all feel, and you can sort of know from going into their classrooms they haven't really bought in yet. How do you develop that in the department? And so I took doing math together from this program. After my first summer in the Math Leadership Program, we started doing math together a lot, and people loved it. I mean, just the other day, again, we were doing math together, although really it was designing a lesson for students, but we had to do the math together to design a lesson for students, and afterwards, these are just my favorite meetings. And I was like, great, this is what we usually do, and it's my favorite kind of meeting too. So getting people to actually experience what it feels like to have to be liberated, to be able to figure it out on your own, whether that is something you're leading, bringing in people who do PD around that kind of stuff, making sure that people have that experience. We did a bunch of us from the school, Math in the City PD with Cara Im, who probably some of you guys know, a couple of summers ago, and some people who were not just math teachers who taught special education, and therefore a bunch of different subjects came and they were crying. At the end of the first day, said, I was so bad at this, and actually I can figure it out. So coming up with ways to have teachers feel what it can feel like to understand math, feel successful, and be able to figure it out. And then, what was the other thing I was going to say? This is a thing I stole from Robin, having teachers give input on what they want to work on, because really, you can end up spinning anything. Like, you might know as a leader, this is what we have to do in PD, but if you can kind of spin it so that it's coming from, like, your goal was to do this, and so we're going to do this and read this professional text together and whatever because you want to work on it, there's so much more buy-in. And having, like, a lot of exchanges between teachers in the department to learn from one another has been something that has helped people. Like, you see something going on in someone else's classroom down the hall, wow, kids really understood it and they were engaged. I think teachers are more likely to go try it because it's not coming from me, it's coming from another colleague.
Thanks, Susie. Josh?
So I'd like to respond to question 5 about what it means to be a math person. So I think in our society we sort of tend to classify people into these broad categories like math people and non-math people, right? So I always wonder what that means. So people at my school sort of consider me a math person. I don't necessarily see myself that way, however. I mean, I was an English major in college, and I became very interested in math sort of a little bit later in the game. But as I started teaching and started seeing the strategy students were using, it became very compelling to me. And then I went back and to the Math Leadership Program and sort of became more immersed in the content, and I found that to be really valuable. But I think at the heart of this issue of math people and non-math people is really what are we saying about, to what do we attribute success? Right? Do we attribute it to innate ability, or do we attribute it to work, perseverance, those kinds of things, right? So I think that in our country, we tend to kind of look at math success as being something you're sort of born with, and you know, sometimes you'll hear people say to kids, you know, it's okay, like some people are good at some things, some people are good at other things, right? As though it's sort of a fait accompli that someone will be good or bad at something. So we think that these comments, I think, are helpful in some way. Maybe there's some empathy happening. I'll hear that sometimes with parents talking to their kids, and they'll say, you know, math wasn't my subject, and that kind of thing. I think these stereotypes are harmful for all concerned, right? So they're obviously harmful to students who don't see themselves as math people, right? But I think it's also harmful for those that are sort of put in the math people category as well, because I think it sort of undersells their work that they're doing, right? So oftentimes when I see students who are excelling in math, it's often because they think about it a lot and they enjoy it and they challenge themselves with it, right? And it's something that they're thinking about deeply, and maybe at times when we're not teaching them about it, right? So I think when we say that they sort of woke up, fell out of bed, and were good at math, I think it's kind of not giving them the credit that they're due for the work that they're doing. So some of you may have read the recent book that came out by Joe Bowler called Mathematical Mindsets, right? So there was a study in that book that was really kind of related to this topic. So there was a study that was done where professors from about 20 different disciplines were asked to what do they attribute, to what level of success in that discipline can be attributed to giftedness, right? So not surprisingly, the maths and sciences were sort of like heavy on the, right? So you're sort of seeing a scientist as being gifted or a mathematician as being gifted, right? So interestingly, philosophy was also a subject that people saw as being gifted in. That was kind of interesting. But not surprisingly, right, the math and sciences fields were overrepresented in this way, but the thing that was most troubling is that there was a correlation between the people who, the fields that were seen as being, as giftedness being highly related to success were the most underrepresented by people of color and women in those fields, right? So that really was like a very kind of jarring reality to me. And I also don't think we approach other fields in the same way of, if things come to you quickly, then you're good at it. So I think we have this connection with speed.
Thanks, Josh. Go ahead, Evan.
I chose to respond to question 4, how do we not allow the scores to determine how we think about and teach math? I think this is just a tough question for a lot of schools. So many funding decisions and matriculation and graduation decisions are made based on these tests. I think that for us to assume that schools are just going to devalue their importance, that's not really something that's going to happen. So in my experience, I've been working in charter schools for about 10 years, and it's been really interesting because when I got there, it was actually before Common Core, and I would say, at least in the networks that I was working at, it was sort of just universally seen that the best way to teach children math was through direct instruction, sort of the I do, we do, you do style of teaching, and students were doing really well on the exams, and no one really was willing to push any further than that because the schools, were getting the results that they wanted. But as the transition to Common Core standards came in and the tests became more rigorous, that was no longer the case. So I actually found that in recent years, schools have sort of identified that, one, that is actually not the best way to teach children, and they are really looking for opportunities to teach children and build a more deeper understanding. The problem is they don't really necessarily know how to get there. And I think that is actually the larger question. So, I think everyone obviously wants a quick fix, and it's not something that can be fixed, quickly at all. It's something that does take time. What I have tried to do, at least in my experience, to get teachers, leaders to buy into the idea of a more progressive way of teaching where students will sort of achieve that conceptual understanding is to try to sort of use something that those schools really do care a lot about, which is data. And I found that really working with teachers around formative assessment, where we really think more deeply about what data we're actually taking, right? Not just what scores they're getting on the test, but like in real time, can we really get an understanding of where our students are with their conceptual understanding? Trying to get teachers to work through sort of anticipatory frameworks where when planning a lesson, they can actually think about it ahead of time, really based on that lesson that they're doing, sort of where are my students gonna fall in their understanding. And I found that through that work, sometimes teachers sort of have those epiphanies that, well, if I've planned this lesson and I actually, right at the end of it, really can't say more than, that kid got 2 problems right out of 5 and this kid got 4 problems right out of 5, then I really don't have an understanding of where my students are, and that's something I want. So through that, teachers and leaders can then be brought in, and from there you can kind of gain some traction at least. I think the larger issue really just goes back to the quick fix and everybody sort of understanding that if you're making sort of the transition to teach in that way, in year 1, your scores might not be what you want them to be because, right, it's not just that it's sort of teaching in that way takes time, but everyone from leaders to teachers are actually learning how to teach in that way effectively, and that's going to take time as well. So everyone really does need to be brought in.
Thank you, Evan. All right, so we were gonna just do a quick response down the line, but do you wanna just go into the breakout groups, or does anybody have anything they wanna add on? You kind of all already did the second part of the panel. You added on to each other's, is that okay? So what we're gonna do is, these are the questions that you submitted to us, or maybe, the last half hour has provoked some other questions for you. So what we're gonna do is the panelists are gonna come to the tables and you're gonna be able to have a more in-depth conversation with 1 or 2 of the panelists. So you guys just pick a table. And we could also, the math leadership people could actually join the panelists and do some, if you're interested. The math leadership people, would you want to join the panelists and maybe support them in the conversation? Well, what do you want? Do you want a panelist, or do you want a?
I feel like we should have a non-math leader person who's always math here. School math teacher and a coach for
They are successful in math, but
I'm in the third, going into my 3rd summer as a math teacher. Oh, we just get to ask some questions. So what, I guess, my biggest question is,
I haven't read that book, but
I work with a leader who is not a math person, right? Yeah, quote unquote, right? Not like legit, right? Like his specialty is the Spanish teacher. And he is in charge of the math department and the science department. And so, I guess what I was thinking about was like, you're a math person, right? You're a principal who's a math person, right? And you were a math teacher for a long time, and then so like you have to take care of other things too. And so then like, how do you? You're slanted towards math, and so then how do you negotiate that with other things? Because you want to do like all math stuff, I assume. That's how I was thinking. And then how do you negotiate the other things you have to do that are not math?
It's a good question. A lot there. I think I'm sort of a little on the fence. I feel like sometimes, I certainly agree with the whole side of things. You're an instructional leader, you should be able to go into any classroom and you should be able to give advice to the you can't give advice to a teacher. And I also think, to some degree, teaching is teaching. I believe kids should be engaged. It doesn't really look that different if they're engaged in one subject. You should be able to tell if you're investing difficult. So questions are okay. Like I think in some ways, teaching and loading in a and yet on the other hand, and at the same time, I do feel more comfortable with being a math teacher and I think we are all experts in more so in what we teach. So and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think feedback is better for an English teacher than someone who's taught that same class. So what my school tries to do, we have this system that we've kind of developed where people really do, we don't just have one math teacher, one teacher. We've sort of programmed our school so that even though it's a small school, we have at least 2 of everything. So people do share lesson plans. So hopefully, in an ideal world, every sort of newer teacher is always going to be sharing everything with someone for a while, and you'll notice I think has been really successful. So with that system, I think, hopefully I feel like I don't have to be the one to always support every teacher. And I think one of the biggest problems I have of that, this idea that one of the biggest problems in education is that leaders supporting 30 people doesn't make any sense. Just like deaf people, right? What we should be doing if we could restructure things so that each leader is working with 3 or 4 or 5 people at a time, but intensively divide them up.
So I have a logistical question about that. So what does that look like? They share every day. One teacher sharing plans with another teacher. How do you build them? Does that mean they have time every day where they sit together and talk about it, or is it? I'm just wondering logistically for people are like, I don't have time for that.
Right.
Teachers can't plan together.
Right. It's sort of a long version. The quick version is we really restructure the way we all
But now how do you get the confidence?
We try not to do nearly as much with traditional PD. And we try to eliminate a lot of the other structures. If everyone's supposed to have a PD meeting once a week and a mentoring session once a data meeting once a week, an observation conference once a month, we kind of reorganize it and eliminate all these things and just have this one team of terrific people and someone who can call a team leader and they get a reduced stage of assignment to support.
And you're talking about the thing, and there's all these people who want to do it.
I have a question. How does it? My biggest conflict right now is this very big ethical dilemma of I have 2 10th graders. Well, I have 2 10th graders in particular who are taking algebra for the 2nd year in a row. They're both at about the 3rd grade level. They've both been in my class for the past 2 years. I've changed it up, but it's still algebra. I'm still teaching for understanding, and I feel like I'm torturing these students. And at this point in the year, in just talking about what their options are, I'm trying to get them credits, and so I've kind of pulled them away from the class. And I just don't know if I'm doing the right thing in doing that. But I want them to graduate, and I don't want this to be their whole existence, trying to get through this class.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard one. Again, there's all the different sides to it, right? I think it's really difficult when you get kids at a high school level who are so far behind it. It's incredibly frustrating, and you worry, is it too late? How can I teach just basic number sets and things like that in 10th grade, and will they ever be able to pass the test? My school 6 to 12, so we have more control over middle school.
Is too, but they still,
Yeah, I mean, obviously still the school it's really difficult, and I do know some people who would say, look, at this point, do I just have to do road drill in 11th grade and pass a regional exam? I don't know if I have a great answer. Like some people say that. I still think, even if you wanted, for a regional exam, if you had a connection or something like that, I still think conceptually, months at a time, emphasis on 5 years to 14 years because be better than someone who's still got skills. So I still emphasize conceptual teaching. One of my biggest pet peeves is I talk to so many people I I have to do all this to cover the test, and I have to do this for the test, and I have to do this for the test. And then,
I don't know that, but it's orthodox.
like, what in the world? Why would I be listening to your opinion on this? Test scores in New York City in math are terrible. And then all these people are saying, well, we need to do it this way for the test scores. There's something completely inconsistent with this.
To be able to say, you know,
I also,
maybe if
just
you
on
had.
that same that testing point, I also think it's important to, for people to think about so many people use that excuse that they need to have this test. I think,
do like the idea of doing
the thing that bothers me, if you look at many of those teachers in the curriculum, and they're doing one type of problem each day. Well, I have to cover it, so I have to do this time. So that example up here, this problem tomorrow, and then it gets to a test, and I see 20 problems without a mini lesson. And it's, that's a completely different experience. So you're doing problems like. You're saying, I'm gonna do.
That'll take me a while.
It's ready for a test, which is completely different than the experience the kids are going to get on the test. When are you ever going to give kids an opportunity to come into a room and face problems on all different topics without telling them how to do it? You never give them that experience. Anyway, that was kind of I don't know if I answered your question.
I mean, sort of. I think that, I agree too that the best way for any student to pass the test is through conceptual. But I also think it felt me, like for the one student, I'm not even trying to get her to the point of passing the test because that's not where she's at. But I also am being told that I can't give
Every day should have
alternate assessments or alternate criteria. Her grade has to be based on algebra skills, and I've already done that where I've cut it down to like 5 or 6 standards that I'm expecting these to be able to do, and I think already I can give you algebra credit for knowing these things. But yeah, I still go back and forth on the what's at what point say I have to get the student to graduate from high school for their best chance, and at what point do say you have to let this down.
if someone's coming to I think
And that's like what keeps me up at night right now.
we're gonna do some direct instruction. Let's do it after you've done some things.
Thank you. Yeah.
Another thing,
It's similar to the conversation I had, or I can continue to have with both my teammates, grade level teammates, and
So,
principal,
before you
in that they acknowledge that I do deviate from the book to make the math
right? Like
more
okay,
conceptual.
and then see these
But then their comeback is always the same, but for those kids that won't get it that way, they need to see it at this point. And it's not necessarily about that. Some kids need it that way. Yeah, and it's like, well, they're still not doing it, so they're still not doing it.
like that.
You know, like you said, so I do this for the test, but they're still not doing it.
Right.
So I gave it to them that way. They're still not. And I can tell you why they're not doing it, because it's an attention, it's a processing of language. I mean, it's not about the math. I have plenty of videotaped iPad interviews of them talking about math very fluently.
I think there's just a lot of things to overcome. I've seen so many times. I was years ago. I was in a district in the Bronx where they implemented math before and it didn't go well. But I loved it. I mean, it's difficult. It's hard to learn how to teach that way. So you see people do project-based math, and if you're not doing it well, it can be a complete flop where kids are not learning, and then some people get to say project-based learning is rough, and you can do it. discovery tasks that not work, because it's really difficult. I mean, in my school, we have a lot of like CFP tasks, about those discovery activities and things like that. But it takes a couple good, I mean, I like, what do you think it takes to get a new teacher good at teaching project-based math? You know, our sixth graders are not sitting there doing measure, we have them plan across the country, the map of the country, and a ruler, and plan your trip, decide where you want to go, and they all get excited and swim. Meanwhile, they're doing 50, they're having lots and lots of measuring and portions. And that's hard to do, but still, the first year teacher who tries it, it doesn't work all the time at all. I think it takes about 5 math projects for a series of sort of open-ended, authentic projects. I think it takes about 5 per year. Basic level math, real good every day over the course of those projects to see the first one really get how why I talk about, and they still, so many teachers, they still want to just turn it into, they still want to, let me tell you how to do the first step, let me tell you how to do that. I think it takes like about a year to get someone to start to feel comfortable with discovering tasks and how they like doing projects here. It's hard.
Is getting that first year teacher's buy-in the same process as getting your AP's
Now, as far as the
when she's got 15 years plus on in terms of experience?
Right. My school,
You do the same thing.
we hire a lot of first year teachers. I think in our hiring, I value both. I think because it's way more buy-in when you're a first year teacher than
That's my question, I think, to bring you back off what you're saying, it's like, what do you do when you have a teacher who's been teaching 20 years and they're at the end of the game and you're telling them they gotta change up their game? How do you handle a scenario?
I'll be honest to say it's one thing I haven't been working as much as literally, started in school. We really did hire a lot of new teachers to start with. And so our math department all started in our school as first year teachers. Still, people struggle. Not everyone buys it. We still do have some people who want to go in that direction and leave. That veteran who doesn't buy in, being more collaborative within
most math teachers that I veteran teacher are shying away from collaborating with students.
There are with other teaching becomes very political and very someone I want to
groups of students within the classroom. My experience was that they don't allow the kids to
if it's the leader who doesn't buy
talk to each other.
They don't want to buy first
in the sense that there's too much floundering within the groups, and then that leads to, let's say, misbehavior or inactivity and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Especially because some teachers would really encourage something. And then a principal who said, of going back my day, but somebody just, when I was young, she literally one day would tell me she's terrible at math, and the next day she would say, well, when I was a kid, that's how I was, that's what she did that way.
Everybody's awareness just for a minute, I hate to interrupt these wonderful conversations. But I just wanted to ask what the group wants. Usually around this time, we were gonna wrap up, but what I was gonna wrap up with was the panelists giving you one final piece of advice or thought to walk away with, and then we want some feedback from you. But the conversations in the small groups are going so well that I think the panelists can decide how you want to do this. What do you want to do?
I don't have any wise conclusions.
You don't have any words? I find that hard to believe, Tom.
No chicken.
Anybody? Bueller? Anybody have a? You want to just continue for about 5 more minutes? Okay, I can
so that it's.
Yeah. I think sometimes when people see real good math, like have people, a few people in the school who will start, hopefully by seeing it inside and by seeing the results they can buy.
And I think they have to experience it too, like for themselves, but also because they'll always be like, well, you can do that, but I can't do that. My kids can't do it, I can't do it. Like they'll always give you that excuse.
Yeah,
but
your kids
I
are
think
special, my kids are
experiencing, like Lucy was saying, like you just pursue this together because surely they've never experienced it, right? Or else they would likely have to play. It's super scary. And so having those experiences as a veteran teacher, maybe you need, 10 times as many of those experiences as elementary teachers. And I feel like there's gotta be hope, right, for everyone, even the 20-year veterans.
To you about how you nudge teachers in the right way or ask them questions when there's a number of teachers at my school have to talk really well about we're doing conceptual understanding, that's the best way to learn, yada yada yada, and then you go into their classroom and the two don't match, right? And it's very, and so what are moves that you can make to kind of make them aware that what they're saying and what they're doing are not matching up?
It's the and the teachers that have a little bit of a barrier we get it wrong, but I think every I mean, I don't know, I guess everyone's looking at different styles and philosophies about observations in the classroom.
Where do you start? How do you begin that?
I think one thing that does
first year of that
is to just talk to kids when they're
common branch license.
I think if you can ask
to that next level,
we try to really push our teachers to tell them you could model and why are you learning it? Why is it important? And can you explain it? It is not threatening. I mean, like, if you in a room and kids are working on something, and you ask them what are you learning and why are you learning it? How are you going to use this? And is it interesting? I think you need to get real honest answers very often. If it's and the fact is, you will hear kids say we're learning how to divide fractions. And if we ask why, I don't know. I think some test.
And I think like pretending to be that kid too, like if you have it in your like, okay, so like what if the kid is like, right, like I'm not sure, like why does that work or why does that happen, and puzzle over it as if you were a kid and figuring it out. And then that all comes to the I mean, I feel like you can push when you're role playing and then like, you're like there's I just hear this all day, every day, right? Like, oh yeah, well that kid, she's been asking for tips, right? So doing some of that role playing, pausing and okay, like let's slow down around this right here, I didn't understand that, or
another way to think about it is that we spend kind of like with kids, we think so much about the kids failing, and not about the kids doing well. Like with teachers, I think another thing to consider is let's focus on the ones who do buy in as much as possible. I think that's if there's that one who doesn't buy in, very often I'll put them in the grade where it's not going to sort of interrupt the development of the teacher, and put that person there. Let's focus on the one that really are interested.
Okay, everybody, now we really have stuff, and what we're gonna do is ask the panelists to stand up.
Work with them.
Panelists to stand up,
Before you
please.
know it, you have it next.
And what I switched it around, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna, if you got, you know what, you can structures that all go sit down. Panelists are gonna, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna ask the
other eyes on,
the one thing.
it's not just the leader's eyes saying,
I'm gonna ask the panelists, instead of asking you, I'm gonna ask the panelists, what are they walking away thinking after having your conversation with all of you? So, what are you gonna walk away thinking about after speaking with all of them? Just one sentence. You can sit. One sentence. Just give it a minute. about what you're gonna walk away with after this wonderful engagement. And then while they're thinking, we really love feedback. You know, it's Bank Street, we love feedback. If there's a page the third page of the, at your place, there's feedback and reflection. Something you learned, something you're wondering about, something you'll use, and something you want to know more about, or what you want to learn next, and then if there's anything else you'd like to share with us, we'd like to hear it. So you guys have a couple minutes to think about what you learned from talking to all of them.
Yes.
Only a sentence. One sentence. I know. Meaning I can one sentence.
We're making it possible.
Yeah. Let's start with Evan. We'll start with Evan. All right, Evan, you guys ready? Go ahead.
I'm walking away really hopeful. The conversation that we had at our table, we ended just talking about sort of some of the differences in ELA and literacy, teacher preparation, and professional development versus math, PD. And I guess the message that I would send is really to be an advocate in your school and in your community for math, professional development for all. And if you are not getting it, just know that there is a big wide world out there where there are plenty of places you can go to get that professional development if you are not getting it in your current school.
Thank you.
That was more than one sentence,
It was a complex
so I think my one sentence would be, given that math teaching or teaching is a cultural activity, right? How do we get students to think about math differently than our own experiences were?
My takeaway is I think a lot about how to grow the mathematical mindsets, it's still Joe Bowler's title, of students and math teachers at their school. But this conversation made me think about how might we need to grow the math mindsets of other adults in the school.
This experience just reminded me how important it is to keep talking to educators from other schools and meet as many people as you can who are thinking about important ideas like this and keep the dialogue going.
I'm not sure I can do one sentence, I'll try. I think our discussion sort of reminded me, I feel like my school, we always have our issues, but I think we have built a pretty solid sort of math ed culture. And it reminded me of the difficulties of feeling like you're in a minority in that in your school. And that's a big challenge, and I would urge people to sort of stick with the people, try to build the number up, and don't panic and worry too much about the people who don't have the same idea.
I'm walking away thinking about and reminded of how important it is to talk to teachers, and as leaders not getting isolated in our offices and at our computers, and making sure that we are constantly getting feedback from teachers and including teachers in the work.
Well, we really do want your feedback, and thank you so much for coming, and enjoy your conference groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you.